Hello builders, my name is G. Today we've got a quick tutorial. I've been working a lot with Turborepo recently, and it's a build system that allows for us to work with monorepos. If you're not familiar with that concept, this is what a monorepo is. You can see they provided a brief example here. So let's just take that we have multiple applications that we've written, and they all share a bunch of boilerplate. And we can take that boilerplate. An example would be Shadcn, the setup for Shadcn, all the Shadcn components. You have database related stuff, Drizzle ORM files that you have to add to a project and set up, connections to a neon.tech database, which is usually the one that I use for walkthroughs and tutorials, and for authorization, whether you're using Clerk or Better Auth like I typically do, and is the main focal point of today's tutorial. All that stuff, you can put them all into individual packages, have these apps import them, and have shared boilerplate code between all of them, so that if I make any changes, let's say to a Shadcn component, they can all be reflected in these apps that import from that shared package. It's incredibly powerful when you're at a larger company. You might have multiple teams working on different apps, but they might be sharing common packages, and typically those packages are managed by teams on their own. And so, if you have a team working with multiple packages that are built by the company and are shared between different other app teams, then, if there's a command decision that one of these package teams needs to make a change, then that can be pushed out to all of the apps across the company. Now, I'm generally working with smaller companies, and as a solo dev, this allows for us to do horizontal scaling of applications. So when we have one app that's been built for a very specific customer base, and we want to expand our customer base to something that is related, but there is a specific thing that's slightly different about it, well, I don't need to rewrite all of the individual pieces of boilerplate code. What I can do is just pull from shared packages into multiple apps that do nearly the same thing, but a little bit of tweaks for each specific customer, and still have all of the shared code. Don't have to rewrite everything, and one change to one thing, I don't have to jump between project to project to be able to redo all of the changes. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of why we want to use monorepos. And monorepos are the architecture. So it's different than Turborepo. Turborepo is the system that's been built and maintained by Vercel in order for us to easily manage monorepos. And so that's the one that I've used. There are other different build systems that help you manage monorepos. I've just been using Turborepo, and that's going to be the focal point of this tutorial, alongside, as I mentioned earlier, how to deal with Better Auth when we're using Turborepo to manage a monorepo. So what are some of the difficulties with this? Something that I've found, there are examples that are being provided. A lot of these technologies, like Turborepo, are super new. So a lot of this stuff is kind of difficult to put together, and I don't think there are really good documentations for how to set it up. I personally found it quite challenging, so hopefully in the process of following me through this, we're able to get this accomplished. Now, we could follow the Turborepo installation instructions here. You need to use pnpm, by the way. Just wanted a quick aside there. I tried using npm, doesn't work. You need to use pnpm. You can just use pnpm to just install, then go back to using npm commands for running or whatever else. But really, when you're using Turborepo, it's by preference to use pnpm. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to jump over to use Shadcn real quick, and we can have a discussion on the Shadcn documentations related to that. We're here in the Shadcn UI documentation, and I wanted to use Shadcn as an example of another package that we can include within our monorepo alongside Better Auth. Kind of just to show the power of being able to share a package that we install into monorepo, then distill it down into a package which we can import into all of our projects and have shared code. That way, if we make a change, as we often do in Shadcn for any modifications to the components, then we can have those shared differences reflected in our applications. So later on, when we configure Better Auth, we don't need to do it for each individual applications. We can just do it once and have it shared across multiple applications. So to get started, we can go down here, take a look at this installation command that we have here. Now, using npx, it's unfortunately not going to work. You're going to have to install pnpm to do it. Even though they list all of these different providers, I'm going to go with pnpm because that's the one that's most recommended to be used with Turborepo. So let me just copy this to clipboard, and we're also going to see some potential issues with the Shadcn documentation here. So this might dual hat as also not just how to show how you're going to use it with Better Auth, but also how to use Shadcn in Turborepo as well. So I'm happy to showcase that. Let's go over to the terminal. I just skipped ahead to it erroring out. If we just pasted in and ran the command as the Shadcn documentation asks, we're going to hit this error. The reason for this error is the canary version right here. There's an issue out on GitHub at the time of this recording. It might have been fixed, so you're welcome to try this on your own and see if it's been fixed by the time you see this tutorial. But as of September of 2025, it has not been fixed. So do try it, see if it works. But if it does not, as you can see here, then what we can do is just use latest instead of canary, and it should work. So when we go through this process here, run this, it's going to install a little bit, then make sure that you go down from just Next.js. If not, you're creating a single Next.js application. Instead, we want to go down, use monorepo. So sometimes you might be super eager, hitting enter a lot, and bam, you hit the Next.js. So if you were wondering, like, where's that option? Just wait a little bit, then go down, use the arrow keys, hit enter to choose monorepo. The project name, we'll just call this Better Auth with Turborepo, or in Turborepo would probably be a better name. And it's going to create. It's going to take a few minutes, as they say, so we'll be right back once it's done installing. Okay, so that did not take as long as the error. You can see here they've created a new Next.js monorepo, and now we can also start adding in components. So let's go take a look at our project within VS Code. We're here in VS Code, and you can see the structure of our Turborepo. Let me expand it to make it a little bit easier to see here. First, you can see a model application that they've created, a model web app, just a normal Next.js app. If you wanted to add the source directory, what you would do is just add a new folder to this, add a source directory, go into your tsconfig, and let me pull this down. Make sure that you're adding a source, right? A source here to the path. If you wanted to add the source. So I know there wasn't an option when we created the monorepo, but just in case, just like me, prefer to have it that way, you can add it that, just follow the instructions that I just gave you. For this tutorial, I'm going to leave things alone and just use the structure that they have here, just to keep things as simple as possible. Another thing to look at down here is our packages. They already include 3 when we installed this using the Shadcn command. We have ESLint for errors, we have TypeScript for all of our typing, and the UI package, which is the Shadcn components. For right now, we only have the button. We need to add all the rest of them. I'm just going to grab this terminal and make it a little bit bigger so that we can see all that stuff. So to install all of our Shadcn components that we might need, what we're going to do is go into our packages/UI directory. Then here, what we're going to do is just use this command here, pnpm space dlx space Shadcn at latest add. Then they're going to ask you which components you would like to add. Let's hit A, toggle all. You're welcome to just go through, use the arrow keys, choose whichever ones you like. All of them are there. Just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to hit A to toggle all, and then hit enter to install them. Once they're done installing, we can see here on the side, all of our components have been added to our project, and we're able to use them within our project. So if we just go into this page.tsx here, we have this button already, but let me just put it within a card component real quick, and let's just do card content, stick it inside of this button here, and when we want to run a Turborepo app, you're going to hit turbo dev, and actually I usually do this from the project root, so we'll just do it there and do turbo dev, and inside of here you can see that it's running our web app here, and it's at localhost 3000. So let's navigate to that. Just bring it over, and there we go. You can see the outline of the card, and then the button in the middle here. Let me just add something to the card so it's more readily apparent that it's a card. So we have card header probably, and then just write, hi, this is a card. Let me see how that looks. Okay, not the best. I think that's just because we can put the card header inside of the card content. Oh, well, whatever. That wasn't the point of this tutorial, to be able to style all this stuff, but yeah, showcases that I can use the card within here, and the imports path is at workspace UI component/button, so that's the same path to be able to get it from here. You'll notice within package.json, if we just go into here, all the stuff that we need to export, you can see that we declare it here. So anything that's needed from components, we just grab it from there. And anything that we might need from libraries, which I believe is just the cn function, there it is. And the use mobile hook, if you need it. Just grab it from hooks, components, and library. And the preface in front of it is at workspace/UI. Then to go back into our web app here, the way that we quote unquote import it is to have this dependency and make sure that you add the at workspace/UI here, and that provides the connection between this UI package that we have for our workspace, the entirety of the monorepo, and make it available to import in our web app. Great. Then just cleaning things up here, close out everything. What we're going to do is add in the Better Auth package. So we're going to create a new folder here, and we're just going to call this one. And the first thing we're going to add inside of our auth package here is a package.json, which should really be the first thing that whenever you add a new package, you add inside of there. We can do name, and we'll name it at workspace/auth, so later on we can import things this way. Type module, we'll have exports, which will be empty for now. We'll add some stuff in there later. We'll have scripts, which will have build, use tsc, dev, tsc --watch. Then after scripts, we'll have dependencies, and this will use at workspace/db. We'll have a database in a second. We'll add that after we're done with the auth package, but we'll just add this in for now. We'll grab Better Auth, which will be of version that. Then we'll have server only, which will have, let's see, there we go. And then last but not least, we'll have dev dependencies, TypeScript, and that can be latest. Awesome. So let's go in and create the two things that will be in our exports. We're going to create a new folder here, a source, and we'll add in a client.ts and a server.ts. And so inside of this package.json, I like to have things compiled, and so we can stick them into a .dist distribution file. So first we'll create a ./server as something that someone can import. Then we'll have types b and ./dist/server.d.ts, just the standard convention that I've seen for how people have done this. And then have default, which will be ./dist/server.js. Then we'll have one for client, so ./client. We'll have types again, pretty similar, dist/client.d.ts, and default, which will be ./dist/client.d. Whoops, not .d.js. There we go. And so, if you couldn't tell already, ./client for all the things that are related to auth that go into client components, we'll put into ./client, and anything that is needed on the server side or just is in general, which would automatically default it to being on server side, we'll put it in server.ts. Great. So let's start adding stuff to these. Client.ts is pretty simple. We'll have import create auth client as create Better Auth client. Just rename it so that, and we'll grab it from Better Auth/React. We'll have export const create auth client, which is equal to a arrow function which returns create Better Auth client, whatever the result of that is. Better Auth client. There we go. And then we'll also export type sign in is equal to return type of create auth client of type sign in. I don't know if we'll need it for this tutorial specifically, but I think this is stemming from the usage with TypeScript or with TRPC and TanStack query. So I don't think this is actually needed for this tutorial. I'll leave it in here for now. If you would like me to also talk about how to use Better Auth in a Turborepo with TRPC, it should be pretty much the same as the normal usage with Better Auth, but just in case you need it, or if you just wanted to see me do it, then put it down in the comments down below, and I'll get right to it. So that's it for the client side. That's pretty much all we need. Using create client here, we'll be able to extract our sign in and sign out functions that we can use during the auth process. Then here on the server side, we'll add in our imports here. So import Better Auth from Better Auth. Then we're going to import Drizzle adapter, so I'll be using that, Drizzle ORM, as how I'm going to communicate with our databases. So Better Auth / there we go, adapters / Drizzle, and then import our auth DB here. And I should label this as a to-do. There we go. Then export const auth is equal to Better Auth. And we'll have database be Drizzle adapter. I'll just call auth DB here for now, but we'll have it added a little bit later. Provider, which will be PG. Pages, sign in is /login. Great. Trusted origins. If I could spell, there we go. Process.environment.node environment. If it is, no, not development, production. Then we'll provide process.environment.app1 URL. Probably not needed for this tutorial since we're not going to actually put this project into production, but just for you to have for when you eventually hopefully push this tutorial or use this tutorial for your eventual production application. You need this type of stuff. You can add all your production domains in there into this. Then we'll have a filter here. We'll have URL colon. URL is string arrow boolean URL. There we go. And if that's not production, then we'll have pretty simply http ://localhost 3001. And I'll just copy paste these. Boop, boop. 2, 3. You can have as many as you want. I think ours is base localhost 3000. Awesome. Once you're done with the trusted origins, then we can do social providers. And just for the sake of the tutorial, like I did in the last one, GitHub client ID to be process.environment.github, all caps, GitHub client ID. Provide the exclamation point so it's not undefined, or we're declaring that it's not going to be undefined. It's going to exist. Then the client secret, which will be process.environment.github. Whoops. GitHub client secret. Then we're also going to have Google here, which should be pretty much the same, except obviously instead of GitHub, we'll have Google. Google. There we go. And let me just add in the commas to make this look neat. And then we're just going to export some types. Export type auth is equal to return type of Better Auth. And then export type session, which is equal to auth $infer session. Again, this is generally something used in TRPC to get proper typing. Probably not going to be using these in this tutorial, but we have it in case we need it. We haven't installed Better Auth yet. We'll do that at the end altogether with Drizzle, because when you do pnpm install, it just installs everything across the board. So I don't want to waste time just installing things one at a time. Although in the time that I did this explanation, probably could have installed it, but whatever. Moving on. We have everything that we pretty much need. We need our database, so let's go about creating that. We're going to create a new folder for our DB package here, so we'll add DB in. First thing that we add into the DB package is package, if I can spell it right, package.json. There we go. And I'm just going to copy it since this isn't really the focal point of the tutorial, but you know, just remember at workspace/db, then you provide the exports. So as a Turborepo project gets bigger, right, your monorepo architecture has multiple applications. They might be having more and more individual requirements for your databases, right? Different tables that are needed for one application that's not needed in another. So usually I try to split them apart and scale things horizontally as well. So you might have multiple DBs doing different things. And so in this case, right, I just have one database in this project dedicated to authorization. You can have later on, right, a transactions DB, a, organization DB to just store each individual thing that, like, some apps will use, some apps won't. And so that's where trying to split this apart into multiple different DBs, just a nice standard practice that I've added in. Your build scripts, like usual, your dependencies. These are the ones that we need. Drizzle ORM latest, Zod latest, neon.db/serverless latest, dev dependencies, TypeScript latest. So pretty bog standard package.json. We won't belabor that. Then I want to set up a tsconfig here, tsconfig.json. It's just normal stuff here. Make sure that we have linting, all that good stuff. I actually noticed that we forgot to add it into the auth, so let me just do that real quick. So inside of auth here, let's just add in a tsconfig.json. There we go. Add same thing. So we're just making sure that all this stuff gets put into a dist directory. If you don't add in this tsconfig.json, then it's going to spit it into the source directory. You're going to have like a bunch of the extra server.d.ts.js files that are going to be added into a source. Nope, we want to add them into a separate distribution folder, right? So that's important that you have that tsconfig.json, so make sure you add it to the auth, and we just added it to our database package. So just closing everything down. Go back into DB here. Let's add in a source directory, and then let's add in inside of this auth/db. Now, I guess kind of you get in a bonus tutorial here. The index.ts is a little bit different in a Turborepo project instead of a normal single application. So let me just copy paste this in as well. So again, we haven't installed it. That's why you see all the errors. So don't worry about that. Once we do pnpm install in a second, all of them should disappear. Also, we haven't written the schema yet, so that's what this is missing. So first, we're importing Drizzle. We're importing Neon HPS database. All normal there. We're just declaring the type, or sorry, not declaring the type. Well, we are. We're going to be creating a single instance of authDB, setting it initially to null and giving it its type, right? Either null or Neon HPS database type of schema, which we'll write in a second. We have a function here to get the authDB. So if we already have one and it's not null, then we'll just return it. If not, then we'll grab the connection string, which is from one of our environment variables. If it doesn't exist, then we need to throw an error to remind us generally that our environment variable is not set. If we don't have it, right, if this is equal to null, then we're going to set it equal to Drizzle, provide the connection string, schema, then we'll return that from this function to get the authDB. All right. This is generally used in TRPC to just get the instance going. But, for the most part, right, we're going to be using this version here, this proxy here, getter, to be able to query from our database and be able to use its functions. So this is a really complicated mess here, but it's required for Turborepos for us to be able to utilize our Neon database through the Drizzle ORM interface. So just copy what I've done here, work through it. You'll see generally on the user side should be pretty much the same as if you were using it in a single project. It's just this boilerplate that is different, and so it's great. We can just make this one change here, and later on when we have multiple applications within our apps folder here, they can all just use this database shared code. Great. Then next, we're going to provide our schema. So this is just the typical Better Auth schema in this case. So, don't need primary key here. Great. So if you've seen my Better Auth tutorial, link to it will be in the description. Then, you're well familiar with the schema, but for the most part, right, we want a user, we want a session, have a table for an account, and any verification the user has, right? So these four will all be going into our database. So now that that's all set up, I believe that we're ready now to add in our database into our auth package. So first thing, we need to go into package.json. Oh, we already have our dependency here, so good. We added it in earlier, so we don't need to do it again. Great. Then let's go into, I believe, server. So we need to import our auth DB here. So I'm just going to remove this and do import auth DB and grab it from /workspace/db/auth DB. So when we build it later, build the project, all the imports will be working. I'm just trying to get through all of this stuff. Auth DB is in there. Process, good. We'll solve that in a second. So I believe client did not need anything from the database. So I think what we're going to do is just run pnpm real quick. Just run it at the root here. pnpm install. Go through, grab everything, and now you can see all the errors should have cleared up. We still have process error. Let's go and look at what's going on here. I believe, let me see, if I run turbo build, there we go. So that we're creating that dist. So now, great. So after we've installed, we do run turbo build, and this error cleared up because now we have the imports already in this dist holder. So if you hadn't created that tsconfig that I had earlier, then all of this stuff would be stuck into our working code, which is not what we want. So as you can see, everything built successfully. So we should be ready to move on. What I'm going to do is test the auth in just the web app that we have here, and we'll copy it, do web app 2, just so that we can showcase that two different applications are sharing the same authorization code. So great, we're ready to move on to the next step. Now then, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is our package.json here, and what we're going to do is start adding in our dependencies here. So right here we have at workspace/UI. So by default, since we installed this Turborepo project using Shadcn commands, it automatically includes our Shadcn package, UI package, into this web app already. So now we need to add in the packages that we created, auth and db, into here. If I do a subsequent tutorial, TRPC, that's also where you would be adding it. So again, if you'd like to see a TRPC with Turborepo, it's not going to be anything exciting. There's not much different. There are some things, but if you really want to have it, comment down below. So let's add in these dependencies. We're just going to go above here. We're going to do at workspace/auth and have this be workspace:*. And then we'll do the same for at workspace/db, and then workspace:*. Great. So now that we have those dependencies, we can now go in and start adding some auth stuff to our app. And some of the things that we're going to be needing in here is likely a login page, and then just a kind of quote-unquote private area, right, that authorized users would only have access to. Dashboard. I'll put that there. So I'm just going to copy and paste this stuff in. Don't need to belabor it. If you need to see how Better Auth specifically works in a project, then again, the tutorial is down in the description down below. I'm just going to copy paste the stuff in. I'll still explain everything, go over everything, but just don't want to bog everyone down by, writing out the whole Tailwind CSS, the JSX, all the project structure. Just want to get in there and talk about the specific things, the Better Auth stuff that we can pull from the different packages that we have created. So first things first, let me just close out these other files and let's go back up on the base level page.tsx. So we haven't added any to here yet. Just want to start here, right? This was where we did the demonstration, opening up the app. I'm basically going to keep everything the same. I'm just going to say hello from web, and I'll just label it web1. Later on, we'll change this to web2 when we copy this project. And we're going to remove this card here. And instead, we're just going to provide a link with a button inside of it. And all this link is going to do is send us over to login. Fairly simple. And let me just add size is small, and then inside of this button, it'll take us to login. Great. And then inside of login here, let's do page.tsx. And I'm going to paste in this component here. So we're going to create a client component here. We're going to have login page, and we're going to grab create auth client from @workspace/auth/client. So we haven't installed and build yet, so that's why we have this error. We'll do that in a second. But I just wanted to go through fairly basic configuration here. We have the sign-in that we're extracting from this create auth client. Remember, that was in our auth package, right, that we were grabbing this from here and exposing it as an import that we can use within our projects. Typically, especially if you had this function be asynchronous and you were doing some asynchronous checks like using TRPC, whatnot, right, you'd want to separate this client check or these client actions into its own component. So in dashboard, for example, if you had TRPC stuff, you would probably create a _UI, and inside of this _UI, you would do dashboard page contents.tsx, and we'll probably keep it just for the sake of this project. And then we would have page.tsx, and then let's see, we do const dashboard page, right? And this would be some form of asynchronous function because we'd be do TRPC async call here, right? And then all that we would do is just return, right, our dashboard page contents. And if you followed my previous tutorials, right, we would have some form of error boundary and a suspense to catch the loading state, error boundary to catch any errors during the TRPC calls, right, and the suspense is for the loading while the TRPC procedures are making our API call over to the server. And then we would have, and let me just pull this and paste it in here, our dashboard here, right? We're using the same auth client. We have the router to do some navigations. We have a sign out function, which we're just using auth client.signout. We're going to await. So you can still do asynchronous things within a client component, but you can't do client component things inside of when you're doing this asynchronous TRPC call. Needs to be in a server component, so you can't do client component stuff like in here. So you just take all that stuff and put it into a client component. You declare this component as being a client component. So very basic UI here, just saying welcome to the user, just showing that we successfully logged in. Thus, we're able to get the user session from our dashboard here. So let me just go in and grab our code here. So here you can see how we're utilizing authorization here. So we can grab our session from auth taken from the server. So here, this was the client side. This is from the server side. We're just grabbing this auth object that we exposed inside of this package here, and we can retrieve it. It's an asynchronous call here of get session because, right, it takes some time for us to determine if a user is authorized. We're going to the server, checking the user credentials. That takes time. That's why you have this await, and it's an asynchronous call. And then this session, right, will get the return value of get session, and if it exists, then we know that the user is authorized. If it is not available, then we would redirect back to login. It's an unauthorized user. They can't be on dashboard. Redirect them over to login so that they can properly log in, get in there. The opposite of what we could do here, right, is to create, grab the session, right? And I'm not going to do it for this tutorial, but, you know, because I've already done a tutorial on it. But you could grab the session, and basically, if there is a session, you could redirect it to dashboard from the login. Because basically, if session exists, then the user is already logged in. Don't hassle them with the login process. If they're already logged in, just navigate them directly over to dashboard. So it would be redirect dashboard instead. This bit here copied with its imports into this page here, and that would redirect them, if they're already logged in, over to dashboard. And you could have that similar thing for the base level page here. If, for example, this page here was the landing page, you would hit the login button as a call to action to the user. Hey, click here to log into the app or sign up into the app, right? That would take them over to the login page. Well, for both of these pages, we don't want to redirect someone if they are not logged in, right? But if they are logged in, we can take them over to dashboard, and this functionality here from Better Auth allows for us to protect this dashboard page from unauthorized users, kicks them back out to the login page. So hopefully that makes sense of the structure that we have here. And now we can go about testing our rudimentary login process here. You can see here we have the two buttons, sign in with GitHub, sign in with Google. It's all in the previous tutorial. And so, yeah. Go and check out that in the comments down below if you're a little bit confused about how all this stuff works. But the syntax and how you're using it, it's a little bit different, right? Because we don't have an instance of Better Auth installed within our project here. My personal opinion, you shouldn't be installing Better Auth into, this web project and then, making more different apps and then having to reset and set up basically a client and a server, something similar to this, like I do in other tutorials, right? Set it up for each one of these, and then, hey, later on down the line, I have to make a change to my Better Auth configuration, change in one of these two files. Then I'd have to go into every single one of these apps and change it. I think it's a lot better if I extracted it all into the shared packages, and then when I have web here and then later on web 2, if I need to make a change to anything in Better Auth, there's an update in the syntax. Old syntax is deprecated, and I need to remove this function here and add in a new one. I don't need to go back, dig in, where did I put auth for each one of these projects? Instead, I can just do it in one package, and since I know all these apps share the same Better Auth package, then, one change fixes it for all of the apps. So let's install and build this project and then test it out. So I'm going to go back and just have this component open so that you can see once we install and build, then this will no longer have any issues. So we're going to go in and do ls. We're going to go into apps, go on a web, and do pm install. It's just going to create it. You can see there it added in auth and db, and you can see errors disappear. Wonderful. And let's go and test it. There might be, I actually noticed, don't want to get too far ahead. We're going to have a little bit of an issue here. So we have all of the UI set up. We have all the functionality set up. We need to set up our API to actually check, see if the users are authorized. So what we're going to do is set up an API here inside of our project. So from web app API, I often forget to do this, so thank goodness I caught this before I actually went on to testing. So you have API auth, and then inside of here, do dot dot, so ellipses, 3 dots, all. And then we're going to add in a route.ts, and then I'm just going to go over and copy it. It's not that long, but just copy it to make sure that I get it right. Import auth. So again, we're grabbing auth here, and we're just assigning the get and post. That's all we pretty much need for auth. So great. We have both of those. Just run, install. I don't think we need that, but just in case. And then we're going to go out to the root, do turbo build just to make sure I don't have any syntax errors that I forgot about. And so we have auth, we have DB building, and then we have web here building. So these three happen concurrently. Linting through. We have some warnings. We forgot our environment variables, so I'm going to have to set that up real quick. But other than that, we should be totally fine. So yep, cool. All of these work. So we need to add in our environment variables. Good. Good that I checked on these things. So what you're going to do is just at the project root, and let me just close everything. So at the project root, so you can just click into the bottom area here, add a new file, .environment.local. Cool. I'm going to paste in all of my keys in here. So what I'm going to do actually is to write out all the different environment variables without any of the actual pieces being there, because it's, don't want to share any of my keys, obviously. But what we're going to need is some form of Better Auth secret. So that's something that's going to be generated on the Better Auth page itself. You're going to need a database URL. You can grab this from NeonDB. GitHub client ID. GitHub client secret, Google client ID, Google client secret. I believe that we need a Better Auth URL. Whoops, URL, which we set equal to http://localhost 3000. Well, actually, we don't need this compared to a usual implementation, because if you remember, instead of our packages, auth, source, and server here, we actually laid out these are all the potential local hosts, because obviously, if we're running a Turborepo, we're going to have multiple apps running at the same time. Each one of them will take up one of our local host ports. So the first app will take 3000, then the next second one will take 3001, third, fourth, etc., for however many apps you have. I added in 4 here, but obviously you can have as many as your computer can possibly run at the same time. So you don't need that. So we need our secret, our database URL, which is taken from Neon, GitHub client, GitHub secret, which is taken from the GitHub console, Google client ID, Google client secret, taken from the Google console. Go to the Better Auth tutorial in the description if you need more information on how to get all of these environment variables. So I'm going to fill them in, and then we're actually going to go into our project. So since we're adding these environment variables at the root, all of these apps, in the way that I'm going to configure them in a second, will use the same environment variables from environment.local here. If you don't make the changes that we're going to make, and it's going to be in next.config.mjs, as just a spoiler alert, if you don't add them in, then you can add the environment variables to this app specifically, and they would use that environment variables as if it's a normal Next.js project. So why am I using environment variables at the root? So here, as you can see, if I have a database URL from Neon, I would use the same database across multiple projects. So if you have a specific database that is specific to a specific app that all the other apps don't need, then you might need to provide it in an environment variable that is in the same directory as the specific app that uses that environment variable. But if it's at a top level, right, this root level, then all of these apps can share them if they have the same configuration that we're going to be adding in a second. So we're going to go into next.config.mjs, and what we're going to do, just copy everything here and paste this bit in here. So I'm going to make sure to have the link to the GitHub in the comments down below, so, you'll have all this. I'll go through it slowly, though, so you'll be able to go through and copy it, or you can see as I'm scrolling down, I'll go through each individual piece here, but just to go through this, right, this will allow for us to load our environment variables here, goes through, parses each one that we've added. Remember that we've added 7 of them. So this is from a root level .environment.local, essentially ///.environment.local, so that all apps will share. I say, oh no, it says every. I'll say all apps can share the same auth credentials from a single file on the monorepo root, right? So not just Better Auth, but the database URL as well. Transpiles the workspace packages, since they're written in TypeScript. That's the same as a normal nextconfig.mjs file. That's generally what it's for. And then the last bit here is content security policy. So when working with Google Auth, there's just a little bit of weirdness in how they set up their content security policy. It requires us to change the headers, to whitelist the domains, and so that allows for us to connect to Google properly. Usually this isn't a problem in a Next.js project, but when we're using Turborepo, this is going to be necessary. So this is just part of the process here as we're loading in the environment variables. So go through here, we get the directory of this particular config file, right? And then we try to load the environment variables from the root environment variable, or environment.local, right? We get the path, then we get the file, we read it, we get all of its lines, then we go through and do a parsing, right? We remove any comments that may exist. Sometimes when we copy paste bits from documentation, they include comments, so we just get rid of that so that we just have the key value pair of our environment variables. So before, you saw me write the different ones, and then when you add the keys in there, you're adding in the values part, right? So this just basically goes through and parses that. Simple function, nothing too hard here. We have a catch here. If we have some form of error, then we can output the error to the console just to let us know. And generally, this will probably only be seen in development. They'll come up depending on your hosting service, right? It might show up in the consoles in that. If you're using Vercel, right, you just check in your console there. But on development, right, you just see it down in your terminal. And then this is the normal next config stuff. You'd add to all the packages here. You have the UI package, right, Shadcn's UI package, auth. I've included TRPC here. Obviously not needed for this tutorial. I just copied the same one that I usually work with. And then we have the DB one. And then these are the headers here, right? And so this is just the specific one. We're just whitelisting all of the different Google APIs, domains, and accounts, which we need to navigate to in order to log in, right? Have the user use the Google login part. Google user content as well. So to grab your user, not just credentials, but the avatar, your full name, your email from the authorization service that Google provides. They have your information that you've given to them, and in the process of logging in via OAuth, you give this app, web app here, permission to look at those pieces of information that you've shared with Google, right? Which is as we've designated inside of our auth package here, and in our schema for our auth DB here, right? For a user, right? Email, name, image, created at, updated at, if applicable. Sometimes Google and GitHub, some fields they have, some fields they don't. So, yeah. Okay. So we'll just grab all of these, and then they just return that as part of the headers. And then we'll just export default next config, which I believe is just normal. So this is the whole file here. That's all I believe that we need to set up. Okay, so let's do turbo dev here. And thus we'll be able to run our project here. It'll be on localhost 3000. So let me just open this up and bring it over. Great. And so let's test out our app to make sure that authorization is working correctly. So we're going to hit login to go into our login page. And since before we were doing some extra things inside of next.config.mjs related to Google, I'll just choose the sign in with Google option here. So here you can see Google, and then underneath this box is all of my email options, just hiding it for privacy reasons, right? I'm just going to select one of my logins, and here you can see welcome me onto my dashboard, right? And if I hit sign out, taken back over to the login page. So authorization should be working. And if I were to try to go back over to dashboard, right, you can see I'm authorized, and it kicks me out to the login page. And so auth now works. Great. So now we're back in VS Code. What we're going to do is just close out of this, and let me just reproduce this app real quick. So what I'm going to do is just copy the web app here, right click on the apps directory here, just paste, and so we'll have web copy, but I'm just going to rename this to web2, and we're going to go in and go into our package.json. We need to rename this to web2, and let's go into our page here, hello from web2, and I'll just go into this dashboard here, and we can just change this from having header to web2 dashboard, and I accidentally got rid of that, so there we go, web2 dashboard. Should be fine. And so now we can just do, I believe, pm install. That should get everything installed into the extra one, and then we'll do turbo build just to make sure nothing weird has happened. You can now see that we have the web app build for the first one, and then for the second one, just taking a little bit, go working through the build process, and we're done. Great. So all of them successfully worked. And now we can do turbo dev. And so port 3000 is already in use. So it'll be 3000 for the web 2 and 3001 for the first one, right? So if we just go back, right? So this should now actually, if we just go back to the base login, hello from web 2, log in, signed in with Google again, going in, and web 2 dashboard, we can sign out, great. Then I'll just go into localhost 3001 just to show the second application. There we go, hello from web 1, log in, sign in with Google again, we're signing in, signing back in, and welcome me back to the dashboard. And again, dashboard without web 2, right? So that's the difference. If we just go back to 3000, right, we have web 2 dashboard. So hopefully that shows you how we can use the same Better Auth package to deal with authorization in both applications. I thought it was quite challenging to do myself, especially related to this whole config file that I had to write for myself in order to get the environment variables loaded, then having to write the auth package a little bit differently than normal in order to actually have it work with a Turborepo, getting all of the URLs that are necessary for the project working, right? What things I'm exporting and importing, considering that I don't have access to Better Auth functions within the web apps directly. I'd have to create exports in the package that are then imported by these apps, and then having the DB, right? It's not something, I mean, I guess you didn't have to create the auth DB specifically, but Drizzle is dealt with obviously a little bit differently than in a base Next.js application, but nothing too hard. I'm sure that all of you could handle writing this out. The schema is totally the same, and I guess setting up Shadcn from the beginning, right? I think their documentation had an error using @latest instead of @canary when you were installing. All that stuff comes together, and we're able to go off to the races and have a pretty good template to create a Turborepo with Better Auth authorization included. So hopefully you gained some value from this tutorial. If you want to see more like this, and comment down below if you want to see and suggest any other types of tutorials. I'm happy to take a look at stuff. A user asked me about Turborepos in a comment, and I was happy to take a look at it and check it out. Also, it was quite convenient that I happened to be taking a look at it myself, but I'm always adding stuff to the docket. I'm trying to work through it, obviously, day job and working on a lot of different stuff, and so try to get to as much things as possible. And it's tough juggling a job and trying to record, so I'd really appreciate your support. Give this video a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to check out when the next tutorial is coming. I hope you all learned something today, and just remember, if G can build, so can you. Go out there and build something awesome. I want to see all of your awesome Turborepo projects. If you're able to build something really cool, it doesn't have to be something super crazy. It can be something, multiple apps using the same packages. Love to check out to see how you're doing it. Maybe you have a better way of doing it than me. Love to check them out in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, everyone.